Welcome to the War Room, episode 223, hashtag War Room Pan, America's Voice .news, later on in Newsmax TV on the John Fredericks Radio Network, FM 99.1 and 103.9 in Chicago, and blown through the CCP firewall in China thanks to G News and GTV, subtitled in Mandarin for the Lao Beijing, the old 100 names, China's deplorable, so they can hear everything that you guys are hearing. Because we're going to need action on all sides of the world to fight off this new Maoist revolution that we've been talking about. It's Wednesday, June the 10th, the year of our Lord 2020. I don't want to say this just before I throw it over to Steve here, is the Citizens of the American Republic YouTube page, where a lot of you guys watch this, and I jump into the live chats and everything. It's absolutely on fire. If you're listening on the radio or listening on the podcast, you want to go in there and get part of the conversation. And the other part of it is I was just made aware that YouTube actually has to send you a little plaque when you pass 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, and we're at about 75,000 subscribers now. So guys, go out there, Bannon, War Room, Citizens of the American Republic, hit that subscribe button. I want to see a YouTube plaque with Stephen K. Bannon's name on it. Steve.
Yeah, what we want is a plaque. Listen, people are on fire about this. The reason this show is so powerful, the reason it's so powerful is we got voices. We got voices from the Lao Beijing, old 100 names in China, against the CCP, and we have the deplorables here in the United States, and tons of working class Democrats. Really want to welcome all the Democrats to listen to us. Listen, the last segment was amazing, Raheem, your rant. I also want to make sure a piece of the nomenclature that we're going to put out there and drive is Quango. I haven't heard a better phrase than that. I haven't heard that word in 10 years. This is going to be very important about what this global revolution is. And remember, you're financing it. It's your pension funds that are financing all the companies moving to China. It's your pension funds that are supporting all the CCP companies in the United States. It's your tax dollars that go to all these NGOs that really foment this revolution against your values, the traditional family, etc. One thing I want to get to, talking about the 10 lost years of this cultural revolution. The single best guest we've had on here about this is Bishop Aubrey Shines. Bishop Shines yesterday was such a dramatic and so thoughtful. Bishop Shines is actually announcing he's starting an entire platform that's going to bring voices of the conservative black clergy into the forefront of this fight. I think they're going to launch on Friday. We're going to have Bishop Shines back on here. And Jack, it was amazing. Audible called yesterday to ask for that because I got to tell you, I don't think anything we've had on the War Room since we started impeachment months ago has had as much impact on that. So when you talk about the forces of light and the forces of darkness, it's people like Bishop Shines that are going to be at the forefront of this. Right before we go to David Bahnsen, because I want to talk about the potential 10-year decade here of Japanification of the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. But Jack Maxey, I want to finish up with Gandhi. I want to finish up with Seattle because, ladies and gentlemen, what's happening in this global revolution is very important. They're taking the icons of freedom and democracy, and what they're doing to Mahatma Gandhi is, to me, outrageous. You heard Jay Kansar in the last hour talk about it, but Jack, you had a very perceptive comment about this.
Well, it goes along with what President Trump said in this little clip we played earlier. Where does this end? I mean, Martin Luther King looked to Mahatma Gandhi as his kind of guidepost, right? This idea of nonviolent protest, this idea that we can change the world by expressing ourselves without destroying the world at the same time. And I believe, and we talked about it in the break, that this global attempt to destroy the name of Mahatma Gandhi and to destroy his statues around the world, this is a signal by the children of darkness that they are rejecting any kind of nonviolent protest. This, I believe, is them signaling to the world that they are ready for a fight. And if we want to know where this ends, guess what? Our beloved Martin Luther King is probably next on their list.
I got to tell you, you got to watch Seattle because your comment earlier in the show that this looked like it was a military campaign is 100% on. I mean, they're looking at it as a military campaign as they expand block by block in the city of Seattle. Okay, now I want to bring in David Bahnsen from the Bahnsen Group out in Newport Beach, California. And this is David over from the Japanification of the American economy. This is why it's important. The Chinese citizens tell us, and by the way, back of me now is the flag of the new federal state of China. These are the individuals, the expatriates throughout the world that are trying to bring freedom and democracy and the rule of law to China by taking down the Chinese Communist Party. They'll tell you that cultural revolution, they lost a decade in China's development and growth. That's what we look at right now with this revolution that's going on in the United States, these neo-Maoist revolution. You take on top of that a potential lost decade of the Japanification of the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, and you can have a very different America on the other side of this. David Bahnsen, the Federal Reserve meets this afternoon. Can you tell us what's the importance of the Fed meeting this afternoon, and develop your thesis more? If you've seen the markets come back and what's happening right now with the 10-year Treasury, do you think we're in a Japanification of the U.S. economy?
Certainly. The Japanification is a combination of two things. The causation is excessive federal government spending. Then the response, which is the central bank trying to monetize it, trying to deal with it. So what it does is it compresses long-term growth because you have the private sector being crowded out by excess government spending. Then you have forced interest rates pushed down by the Fed, all kinds of interventions, manipulations, market activity. It helps asset prices. It boosts up the wealth divide, but it ultimately distorts markets and it compresses growth. It compresses organic growth. This is exactly what happened in Japan. Now, they didn't do it very well. They were still trying to find their way for 10 or 15 years, where Bernanke and Yellen jumped right on it. And now the government spending has no political pushback at all. And you get into our second crisis in the last 10 years. First, the great financial crisis, now COVID. And the immediate playbook is, let's go spend a bunch of money, Keynesian, and then let's go monetize a bunch of debt, Japanification.
So what do you think is going to happen this afternoon at the Open Market Committee meeting and with the Chairman Powell? What is your anticipation of what's going to happen?
Yeah, he's a pretty wise political actor. He has to kind of thread a certain needle, and I don't envy what he has to do, but more or less he has to come say the economy is going to be okay, and yet we have to sort of treat it as if it's a dead patient or a dying patient in a hospital. So he's going to have to kind of indicate that they're going to offer as much aid as is needed for a long, long time, but then also try to sound upbeat. So it's a pretty contradictory message in a sense, but he doesn't really have a choice. They're not going to admit today, Steve, that they're doing yield curve control, and I really think that expression is important for your listeners in the months ahead. It basically is what the U.S. did after World War II. They're going to come in and cap yields all at different maturities. And they're going to do that because they don't have a choice. The federal government can't afford the debt service if long-term rates go higher. But he's got to avoid admitting that they're doing it today. So lately, their playbook, and I'm sure you'd love this, they're saying, yeah, we're studying what other countries have done. And that's always interesting when the U.S. central bank is pretending to learn from other central banks that don't have a fraction of the sophistication or experience that ours does. But that's basically what he's going to try to be threading the needle around today.
Okay, I want our audience out there. We're always trying to put you ahead of things. Gain of function was one of the terms, Quango, and now it's yield curve control or yield curve management. I want to go back to the years 1942 to 1951. Are you saying that the government, basically the Federal Reserve, is going to peg the 10-year Treasury at about 1 percentage point and kind of manage the 10-year Treasury to that like they did in that 10 years through World War II and then that led to the Great Expansion afterwards? Is that what the Fed's going to be doing? And if that is, what impact is it going to have on?
Yeah, you'd be a pretty good central banker because 1% sounds about right for the 10-year. I think they're going to try to peg the 30-year 2% or lower, the 10-year around 1%. But the whole point is they want the whole yield curve down below 2%. What it's going to do to the deplorables is this. It's going to boost asset prices, real estate and stocks higher. That's going to be great for people in higher income brackets and asset levels. But then it disincentivizes investment into future projects. So you get less housing, you get less jobs, you get less growth, you get less innovation. That's bad for the deplorables. They're going to try to make up for it by lending to small business. This Main Street facility that they're unleashing now is certainly very deplorable friendly if they can get the banks to cooperate. The banks have still got to go play ball, and that part remains to be seen. So that's sort of the angle.
David, here's the question I got. I used to go and I went to Oxford, to the Oxford Union. Raheem and the team remember this. We had to fight our way through there. But I argued that this millennial generation are nothing more than 18th or 19th century Russian serfs. They don't own anything. They're not going to own anything. From what Obama and Geithner it did to solve the problem, and Bernanke to solve the problem of the financial crash last time in 2008, this increased support of asset prices makes sure you can't. That makes no sense to save money. You have no interest on your savings account, that these young people don't own anything. They're not going to own anything. You see that in the streets today. One of the reasons these kids are in the streets and so easily led around is they're not really into the system as far as an owner of anything. And so people can come with all this crazy madness on this kind of neo-Maoist philosophy, and you see what's happening in England right now. The masses come off. It's an anti-capitalism movement because capitalism, as we've got it right now, is not working. Do you agree with that thesis that one of the things with the deplorables, and particularly for millennials, is this type of action all the time increases asset prices, but it leaves those people not into the system today as the left behind?
You're 100% correct. There's two words in the expression cultural Marxism. It's what they're doing to the culture, and the Marxism part is what they're doing to the ownership society. You cannot get young people to get into real estate when housing prices are at ridiculous entry levels. And then you get a vicious cycle of disincentivizing ownership of private property when you see it getting destroyed on television and no one doing anything about it. So why would anyone want to go purchase commercial real estate and get invested into urban centers and things like that? And then at the same time, it doesn't give anyone any incentive to not destroy property that they themselves do not own. So it's a negative feedback loop. The stock market has always been the place where you have the greatest chance to democratize private enterprise. Ronald Reagan's really big boosting of 401ks did a lot around that. A couple stock market bursts hurt that in the first decade of this new millennium, but we've started to see millennials coming back in. I think that you have to push private enterprise, small business, and equity ownership to give that right mentality. It's a cultural issue as much as it is an economic one.
Okay, real quickly, we've got about a minute left. If you had a chance to talk to President Trump today, two things he ought to be talking to his Fed chair about, what would David Bahnsen recommend?
Well, I would like him to stop talking about negative interest rates because I think that would completely, totally undermine the deplorables and everybody else. Negative interest rates don't belong in a free society. But what I think he ought to talk about is really perhaps just sort of congratulating Chairman Powell on what he has done so far. It's everything that Trump had been asking for, and POTUS turned out to be right. There weren't inflation pressures, and he didn't understand why Powell was tightening. So now they seem to be on the same plane. I think Secretary Mnuchin has a good relationship with Chairman Powell, but Trump has got to push the Main Street lending program that the banks have to participate, because if the Fed unleashes this thing and you don't get bank buy-in, it's not going to go anywhere. That should be the...
David, thank you so much for taking time. I know it's a busy day every time the Fed meets for these meetings, so thank you very much for taking time for your clients and sharing with the deplorables.
You bet, Steve. Take care.
Raheem, I don't know how much time we've got left, but you see right here, these are the two.
Go ahead.
These are the two converging forces. You have it's captured in both cultural Marxism. You have the converging forces of this cultural revolution that's going on, plus this whole issue about the ownership society, how we actually get people to get a stake in this society. Yeah. I think it's a great unsolved issue before us. We've got to make sure that people participate in this economy, particularly millennials, particularly younger people, that they become part of this, they become active in this, and they know they've got a stake in it. You know, if you have a stake in it, you're not going to be burning it to the ground. You're not going to be defacing it, and you're not going to be trashing it.
It's exactly right. Steve, we're going to jump to a break here. War Room Pandemic. Want to follow everything at hashtag War Room Pandemic. Jack's mixing it up in there right now. Back with Greg Mann, Stephen K. Bannon, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon. The epidemic is a demon, and we can demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room on Wednesday, the 10th of June, the year of our Lord 2020. Back to Stephen K. Bannon.
Well, look, this is the key point, is this Japanification of the economy is going to be central to your lifestyle going forward. Exactly what's going on. Remember, I think we're going to run a $2 trillion deficit this year. Wow. I think we have some breaking news from Secretary Mnuchin, Greg Mans. He just made some announcements?
Yes, Steve, we do. Stephen Mnuchin is quoted as saying, "I definitely think we are going to need another bipartisan legislation to put more money into the economy."
Look, we understand. In the next segment, we're going to get back to the pandemic and Fauci, what he's talking about. There's still almost 1,000 people dying a day of this pandemic. We're going to see if these protests are going to explode this. So Jack Maxey and the team are going to walk through there. But remember, David Bahnsen said, it's two words, cultural Marxism. The cultural part is where they're trying to go after the traditional culture of the Judeo-Christian West, and quite frankly, in India and Japan also, in other countries. And here you see now also the financial aspect of it. This financial aspect of what we're doing is debt is something that people's voices have to start being heard. We understand there was a crisis. You got to prop up asset prices. But I got to tell you, I've been in business with the Japanese since the early 1990s, and they have never really recovered from the asset and flow back then. And Jack, I know you got some very specific ideas about stock market and what it means for pension funds.
Well, one of the things we look at, if you want to see what Japanification means, take a look at the historical chart of the Nikkei average over the last 30 years. They have still not achieved their high of 1990 in 30 years. So if you want to look at what another side of the Japanification of the economy will mean, that means an absolute collapse of our pension system. If you have a 10-year note at 1% and a 30-year note at 3% and a stock market at 0 or -%, your retirements are gone, in my opinion.
Look, we have not had a managed 10-year note at 1% since World War II. So we're a very uncharted territory. I want to go back to the cultural side of this. Seattle, I think, is going to get to be a new hotspot. And I particularly want to talk about the thin blue line, guys. If we can, if AVN's got it up, if there's any way we can play that great emotional response yesterday from the president of I think the police union in New York City. In New York City, New York's finest, and President Trump was saying this time and time again, they were really backed off all the rioting and looting. And this is not about peaceful protesting. Peaceful protesting is a constitutional right. People have every right to protest, particularly in support of what happened to Mr. Floyd out in Minneapolis, his murder by these former police officers. But the looting and the rioting and the anarchy is a totally different thing. And I can tell you, going through New York City down Madison Avenue, going by Macy's at Herald Square, I mean, these things look like bombed out. They bombed out cities. And so this is an incredibly important problem, particularly as we try to open up. New York just opened up the other day and try to bring these stores and these entrepreneurs back. Raheem, do we still have teed up the comments of the police chief union?
Yeah,
the union chief?
Yeah, let's roll it now.
This isn't stained by someone in Minneapolis. It's still got a shine on it. And so do theirs. So do theirs. Stop treating us like animals and thugs, and start treating us with some respect. That's what we're here today to say. We've been left out of the conversation. We've been vilified. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. Trying to make us embarrassed of our profession. 375 million interactions. Overwhelmingly positive. Nobody talks about all the police officers that were killed in the last week in the United States, and there were a number of them. We don't condone Minneapolis. We roundly reject what he did as disgusting. It's disgusting. It's not what we do. It's not what police officers do. Our legislators abandoned us. The press is vilifying us. Well, you know what, guys? I'm proud to be a cop. And I'm going to continue to be proud to be a cop until the day I retire. And that's all I have to say.
Steve.
All we want is to stop being treated as thugs and animals. And this is what you get when you see the defund the police movement, the police free movement, the dismantle the police movement. Remember, this is all from radical neo-Maoists that are trying to take away civil society. They're trying to take away the basic structure of our society. And it's got to be confronted and it's got to be combated. And I think you're seeing this in Seattle. Now, there is talk on Capitol Hill right now about legislation. I want you guys to get into it. What the Democrats have put forward, Senator Scott's got something going on. The White House is kind of trying to get involved. But this goes to my thesis all the time. Plan beats no plan. Nancy Pelosi seems to be always ahead of the curve. I mean, she came in, she's already got a police bill. I think it's 1,000 pages long. It's already got 10 or 12 major aspects to it, while the Republicans are reacting. The Republicans are playing catch up, and the White House is playing catch up. This is why I argued for a presidential commission named in honor of Mr. Floyd that would get to the bottom of this, do a study on the police departments, get the study on things like chokeholds, tactics, all of that. But now the White House is playing catch up. Let's go through what's the bid in the ass right now, gentlemen, and what's really going on Capitol Hill.
Greg.
So one of the things when you dive into the details, the phrase that comes up a lot is condition law enforcement funding. So the issue here with this bill is the 10th Amendment gives states really the power of policing for the health and wellness to police their own communities. So what this House bill is doing is conditioning federal funding for the states incumbent upon their asks of the federal rules for federal police officers and law enforcement, that they also institute the same qualifications.
And what are these qualifications and these rules? I mean, where are the changes hit?
So the changes: banning no-knock warrants in drug cases, qualified immunity. That's going to be a really interesting thing to follow. Also, creating a national database for misconduct, and then also body cams and cameras on officers.
Jack, is this going to be enough? And Steve, is this going to be enough from the protesters chanting defund the police? They take over the East Precinct in Seattle, boarded up. Is that a national register of bad behavior is not going to placate them, is it?
Well, I go back to what the police officer said in New York, and to me, it was very hard to listen to that because you could hear the emotion in his voice. These tough guys are obviously feeling like the hatred, and it's extremely unfair. I think one of the sad things is I don't think, again, we need a one-size-fits-all. The problems are isolated in several of these same cities. We see it over and over again. Baltimore, Detroit, St. Louis, Chicago, Philadelphia. These same cities are having the same problems over and over again. I would actually like to see the president come out and call for those cities to have a specific investigation into their own problems before we start painting every police force in the country with the same sort of brush. And you have to remember
but this is why. But Jack, this is why I disagree. This, I think, presidential action. I don't think right now a correct solution is have the Philadelphia police force investigate themselves, have the D.C. police force, or the New York police force. I think they're talking about the militarization of the police, and they're talking about systemic racism. I think the president of the United States has got to take that head on. And I think you do it by a bipartisan, bicameral commission that also has other voices in there. The president ought to, like the Warren Commission, or like some of these other commissions, the commissions after 9/11 and after Pearl Harbor, to kind of get to the bottom of what, and I realize all these commissions haven't been perfect, but the Church Commission in the late 1970s did find abuses by the FBI and the CIA. It did lead to the Gang of Eight and these other aspects in the legislative branch to at least give some sort of balance in intelligence and in FBI, particularly on domestic surveillance of people. I've been arguing with the FBI and the CIA today. We ought to have another Church Commission. I think the president's got to step up here and take leadership. Let's not leave this to some bill, but let's get to the heart of it. If there has been over-militarization of the police, let's find out, is that true or not? And what if it is true, what caused that? Also, this whole concept of systemic racism. The president should get in and should get the best minds in the country to look at this and debate it and to come out with a definitive report. I just don't think you can turn it over to the. I understand the 10th Amendment. I understand the policing is traditionally a local problem, but I'm not so sure today that you can just leave it at that. Look, it's one of the great things about the war room. We argue about stuff all the time, but I think this requires presidential leadership, and I think President Trump's the perfect guy. Look, he's a law and order guy. He believes in the police, but look. Let's be brutally frank. One of the most progressive mayors in the country is this loser out in Minneapolis. This police department clearly was not screened properly and not trained properly. There's just you cannot excuse I think, cold-blooded murder of Mr. Floyd that was done by these police officers, right? On a relatively minor, what was it? He passed a counterfeit 20, or they thought he passed a counterfeit 20. I mean, it's outrageous, and that stuff, and this is from a progressive city, right? So I wouldn't have a progressive city, and I don't think people out there would feel comfortable with a progressive city studying themselves. So I believe it's just got to come at the presidential level. I think Mr. President Trump can take real leadership, but I got to tell you, the men and women, he made a good point. There's a stain on the badge for what happened in Minneapolis, but there's still a shine on the badge for what these police officers, these men and women do every day for citizens of the United States.
That's right. When we come back, more on this. And Jack, you're going to walk us through more on the pandemic itself, where we stand with the coronavirus. You're seeing new hotspots popping up, not least in Washington State. Surprise, surprise. We'll be right back. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. Greg Mann, Stephen K. Bannon, Jack Maxey, Raheem Gassam. Don't go anywhere. See you in a second.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. I want to make sure that all you guys are involved in this discussion as it goes on. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. I'm going to start reading some of the best comments out in the next couple of segments and on the live streams as we monitor them, the YouTube live stream and everywhere else that we can see your comments. Make sure you're engaged. Make sure you're sharing. Make sure that you don't just feel like an observer throughout all this, because you're not an observer. If anything, this impacts you more than it impacts the people in this room. So make sure you're tuning in and chiming in. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. Steve.
Look, in uncertain times, and if you think we're not in uncertain times, the first 2 hours of this show, first hour and a half of the show should convince you of that. Entrepreneurs are going to be the tip of the spear that lead us out of this. And if you're an entrepreneur, you need NetSuite by Oracle. Go to netsuite.com/Bannon, Bannon. Go right now to the 7 action steps you should be considering if you're an entrepreneur with the best software out there, NetSuite by Oracle. Raheem, I want to make sure people understand one thing. This community is growing every day. It's a global community that we've put together of people that are citizens of their own country and want their own freedom. Your voice is necessary. That's why we want you to get into the live stream. We want your comments. We want you on hashtag War Room Pandemic, whatever country you're in. Later in the day when we put this up in Mandarin with the great people at G News and GTV, we get tons of comments. So we want to do that. I want to show you the power. On this vessel, I was in New York Harbor last week in front of the Statue of Liberty, where I was honored to be able to read the English translation of what the Chinese had read on this proclamation declaring the new federal state of China, which is in opposition to and dedicated to take down the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese version was read by Mr. Hao, who's really the Michael Jordan of Chinese football or Chinese soccer, and his wife, who's a great badminton champion. The Wall Street Journal today has picked up the story and had a big analysis of it. So remember, on this show, you're at the cutting edge of this community. So before we get to the next segment, we haven't forgotten about Dr. Fauci, right? Dr. Fauci, of course, he's only made 2, I think, media appearances in all of May, but we haven't forgotten about him. He's still talking about the pandemic. And look, we're still losing up to 1,000 people a day. We've got to focus on this because they're talking about it coming back. Fauci's saying it's coming back in a big way. So we want to get on top of this. Before we turn to Raheem and Jack and Greg, talk to me. What are people saying on hashtag War Room Pandemic, and what great polls do you have from the live stream on the Citizens of the American Republic YouTube page?
I'm getting a lot of heckles for not wearing a tie today, Steve. Heaven forfend the audience finds out that I'm actually wearing shorts under the table as well. It's that hot here on Capitol Hill. But the question that keeps coming up, and I think we need to keep reiterating this as well, because you are where you are for a reason, and people are asking a lot if you would explain the flag behind you, and I think we should keep doing that so when new people join the show, they understand just what they're seeing, Steve.
Yeah, in the second hour every day where we focus more on the international aspects of it, the flag on back of me is this flag of the new federal state of China. This is a group of really millions of Chinese expatriates throughout the world, all the way from Australia to the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Europe, that have come together to form really a government in exile to stand opposite of the Chinese Communist Party and dedicate themselves to take down the Chinese Communist Party. We had a huge event last week in front of the Statue of Liberty. I was on this very vessel, and in fact, we went to a smaller vessel, actually go in front of the Statue of Liberty, because they respect the Statue of Liberty and honor what she stands for. They want that same freedom, the same freedom of assembly, the freedom of religion. They want the rule of law. And so I was honored to be able to read the English version of their proclamation. The Chinese couple that now live in Spain read the Chinese version, and that caused a complete meltdown by the Chinese Communist Party. This would be like Michael Jordan reading it. He is a revered figure, and they completely, just like Stalin, just like the neo-Maoists want to do, they completely erased all of his name from the internet. He had 7 million followers on Weibo, one of their chat sites, totally erased. They took him all off of YouTube. They had his son fired, who's a big football star on a Serbian team, had his son fired. They took off all YouTube mentions of he and his wife. His wife is the greatest badminton player. Badminton's a huge sport over there in China. She's I think the greatest living badminton player. They removed all mention of her, all mention of him. The Wall Street Journal's picked this story up today, but it shows you that unlike in the past, there's so many dedicated working class and middle class people in China that are expatriates that are coming forward to dedicate themselves to the takedown of the Chinese Communist Party. Every person I've talked to that's a Chinese citizen has told me what's going on in the United States is exactly like the Cultural Revolution by the Red Guard in 1966, 68, all the way to 1978. That's what we're going to have a special this weekend. We're going to do the Cultural Revolution, what it was like then, what are the implications today. It'll be on the Saturday War Room show. So, Jack, I know we're still in the middle. We're still called War Room Pandemic for a reason. We're still in the middle of a pandemic, and I want to bring back our favorite character, stock character, Dr. Fauci.
Stephen, maybe at some point you can get our vexillographer to explain the flag, because a lot of people are saying it's the same colors as the EU flag, and you have the stars. So we'll get into the detail on why the flag is the flag at some point. Just addressing some of the questions from the audience.
It's tremendous symbolism.
Also,
it's tremendous symbolism for the Chinese people.
Yeah,
we'll get into it over this week and explain the whole symbolism of this flag. Trust me, it's not the EU flag, but by a long shot.
Yeah, a lot of our listeners also want us to produce either flag bumper stickers or little flags so they can hang them from their cars to just tee up the CCP, which I think is always nice.
Awesome.
The other thing is we like to read something from our viewers occasionally, and this one kind of struck me because I think this is what kind of impact that we're having. Gloria Murphy writes to us, chilling in capital letters. The fact that our elected officials are actually discussing throwing out law and order by defunding the police as though it were in any way rational indicates how far Marxism has dug its ugly head into this country. True statement right there, Gloria, and thanks a lot for listening. We're going to go back and take a look at Anthony Fauci today. Anthony Fauci he responds to the World Health Organization's remark about asymptomatic people not spreading the disease, which they immediately retracted. But he also talks about the fact that he thinks the coronavirus is his worst nightmare. It's the worst thing that ever happened. He gives a very long interview on CNBC yesterday. But the thing that struck me, which I just could not believe, he talked about how this isn't over yet, how we've got, this is still amongst us. We're going to have any problems, are still going to be here. Yet he never once mentions the potential danger to the American people because we have allowed these protests to occur over the last 10 days, where millions of people have been in the street. We showed the video yesterday of what was going on in Los Angeles. But somehow the scientific community has lost their fear that every American was going to drop dead of COVID-19 if we did not stay at home and shelter, now that we have some other rationales. I mean, to give a perfect example of how dangerous this is, I mean, even poor Mr. Floyd was found to have coronavirus. Now, the thing that I find very interesting with Fauci is, at first, the World Health Organization said that asymptomatic carriers won't have it. Fauci said that doesn't agree with our evidence. I like that. It doesn't agree with my evidence either, but it is a perfect indication of why we need to get rid of the World Health Organization. The other subject that we like to touch upon is hydroxychloroquine, and the World Health Organization, as you remember, 10 days ago canceled their global studies on hydroxychloroquine because of the Lancet article, which was published by a group called Surgisphere, which is this scientific shell company, if you will, out in Chicago. I'm hoping that we'll have some quite dastardly information about them in the next week or so. But now, as it turns out, this same group is being accused of having published falsified papers dating all the way back to 2005. And to show you how strong the bias is here, when we talk about science, it should be repeatable, it should be numerical, it should be 100% objective. This study, within 24 hours, 5 different Western European countries canceled the use of hydroxychloroquine.
Wow.
The World Health Organization canceled global studies that were occurring in disparate places, as from the Philippines to Bangladesh, based upon this false study. So what this shows you, it shows me anyway, that there is this tremendous political bias that is instructing and informing scientific decisions around the world, because this study gave them the answer that they wanted, not a scientific answer. And we've seen this over and over again. We saw this in the Brazil study, where they literally murdered 28 old people by giving them lethal dosages of hydroxychloroquine. Now, the great irony of all this, and this is the things you don't see in the U.S. press, is that South Africa is using hydroxychloroquine. There's an article in the South African press today, and they even claim that they are doing it under the instruction of their communist Chinese colleagues, who have explained that this is the only thing that will work. This is true in Costa Rica. Also, just today in the Philippines, where their study was canceled because of the World Health Organization, Duarte had a conversation with Modi last night on the telephone, where President Modi guaranteed that they will provide all the hydroxychloroquine that the Philippines need. They're going forward with the study. So outside of CNN and the talking heads, the rest of the world is plowing ahead. You're also going to see some articles in recent days talking about troubles in Brazil. But if you dig a little bit further down into those studies, you will see that it's very similar to what we've seen in the United States. It seems that the states that are in direct opposition to Bolsonaro seem to be poorly than the states that are not in opposition. And not that Bolsonaro is defining the treatment methodologies, but states where Bolsonaro has power, or where his people have power, the governors are not defining the treatment. In states around Brazil, they have made it illegal to give hydroxychloroquine to people. Now, just last week, and we should all be proud of this, the United States cut a deal with Brazil, nation to nation. We've delivered them multiple millions of dosages, and we have a study on hydroxychloroquine that's been going on at the Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit. This is one of those studies that truly is a scientific study. It's no retrospection. Nobody's leaked anything about it. But my understanding is that it's a very positive study. It's been going forward. You remember Donald Trump mentioned a few days ago how well Detroit did. You know, put that little question mark in your mind and ask why Detroit did better than some of these other cities with the same exact populations, with the same comorbidities, and the same potential problems. Now, this same study is both for early treatment and also as a prophylactic. Now, Brazil is going to be doing a parallel study along with the Henry Ford Hospital. And we have to also remember, and I don't have much time left, but I want to make this clear. Bolsonaro is a ally of the President of the United States. He is being slammed by the same global forces that are against Donald Trump. And we should all keep an eye on Brazil because Brazil is necessary for this free world. We need to be in partnership with the other great food producers so that we can take care of this planet. And I would ask everybody to pay attention to what is going on in Brazil because it's going to have a major impact on you in the future. And I look forward to seeing the real results of a real study from Dr. O'Neill at the Henry Ford Hospital and with also Dr. Zonato, who was on our show a few weeks ago in Brazil.
What an amazing segment, Jack. Thank you for carrying that. So much information there. We'll unpack more in the next segment. Stephen K. Bannon, Greg Mann's Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, War and Pandemic returns in just a second.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. Jack Maxey, Greg Mans, Raheem Kassam. Over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Yeah, in these uncertain times, entrepreneurs need a way to mitigate risk. The single best way you can mitigate risk is have a software package that helps you think through your business and all your exposure to risk. That software package would be NetSuite by Oracle. Remember, Oracle's the number one platform in cloud computing. NetSuite's used over 20,000 companies. Whether your company is $1 million in revenue or $100 million in revenue, or even if you haven't started a company, go to netsuite.com/Bannon. They've got a package, the 7 action steps entrepreneurs should be taking right now during these uncertain times. Remember, we lay out the uncertainty every day here on War Room Pandemic, talk to you about possible solutions. One solution for you is to become an entrepreneur. If you're going to become an entrepreneur, you need NetSuite by Oracle. Okay, talk about that uncertainty. I want to go back. We're going to have Brian Kolfage, the great leader, patriot, and founder of Build the Wall, talking first anniversary, a special that's going to be tomorrow from 2 to 4 live. The wall is 1 year of the great wall he built down in El Paso to stop the drug cartels is 1 year old. We had a dedication ceremony down there. It seems like 10 years ago now, but it was a year ago. We're going to bring on in a second. I want to really quickly go back to Jack Maxey. Here's what I don't understand. Move the goalpost, Fauci. What exactly, be specific as you can, Jack, because this is so important to the economy. We got New York City just opening up. The Virginia are when the schools are going to come back. What exactly is Fauci talking about? He said this is the greatest thing he's ever seen, the most awful thing he's ever seen. What is he telling us is going to happen?
Well, Steve, that's kind of a trick question to ask me what exactly is Fauci talking about. In the break, I went through his whole interview, and the only actual statistics, actually hard numbers that he gives for anything, is his dispute with the World Health Organization about whether or not asymptomatic people can carry it. He said evidence we have given the percentage of people, which is about 25% to 45% of the totally infected people likely are without symptoms, and we know from epidemiological studies they can transmit it. Now, when he talked about in the other interview, he talked about this is the nightmare situation. He said it's much different than other pandemics because of travel from China, which I think is highly supportive of the president's travel ban, which never was really commented on by the press. But Fauci, per usual, is very weak and light on specifics about what the outcome is. He's sort of like, there's a monster under your bed, but I can't describe him. And I think
evidence-based, science-based database. That's what we want. Evidence-based, science-based database. That's what the commission's got to do about policing these minority communities and overall. And Fauci's got to get better at this. Okay, we'll get to that tomorrow. Fauci's back, so our heads are to Brian Kolfage, one of the great patriots in our country. Brian, it was a year ago that you dedicated a wall that you built, you and the team built, over Memorial Day week, and it was a great time, I think, for America. Tell us, it was a quick update of the wall, and tell us about this special tomorrow to get people refocused back on the border, the cartels, and the wall.
Yeah, well, 1 year ago, this week that we've completed that wall, and it's been proven now that wall has helped the community of El Paso and Summer Park, and the crime has dropped significantly now. And so it's done a great thing. These people, everyone who's donated has done a great service to these communities. And we're getting the team together tomorrow. We're going to discuss some really big plans that we have upcoming with We Build the Wall and what we have coming up next. And we still have more wall to build. And a lot of people think that we're done, but we're not done. We have some tricks up our sleeve, so it's going to be a good day tomorrow, getting everyone back together.
Real quickly about President Trump, I think by November they said there's going to be 400 miles of new wall. I know Tommy Fisher, who is our partner both in El Paso and down on the Rio Grande Valley, we built the wall down there, is now got a big contractor. He's building tons of wall down, I think, in Yuma, in Arizona, and also in California. Where does it stand with new wall that's being built? What's your assessment of what President Trump's accomplished? Because every day you read the mainstream media, he hasn't done anything. It's another Trump failure. Where really has President Trump been? Because you and Foreman Mike have been on top of this more than anybody in the country. Tell us what the truth is.
Well, all the liberal reporting that you're hearing about Trump not building new wall, it's full of crap. It's fake news. He hasn't stopped building, and he's actually ramped up the speed of building since the COVID stuff started. There's new wall going up constantly, and I think the issue is he's replacing this old dilapidated fencing that doesn't stop anything, and it's like barbed wire on the ground, basically, like C-wire, and he's replacing that stuff with 30-foot wall. But the liberals are saying, oh, it's replacement wall, it's not new, but the two don't compare at all. And so yeah, it's new wall. It's been going up, and he's doing a great job, and just people need to realize that and not believe anything that you're hearing in the liberal media about it.
But correct me if I'm wrong, this is why they're doing the replacement wall. Remember, that was in the highest traffic areas. One of the reasons that you selected El Paso to go straight up the hill, no wall had been built there. The Army Corps of Engineers had kind of passed on it, and we knew the cartels were coming across. This is from the local community and the Border Patrol. But the reason President Trump is doing replacement wall is that's the old traditional places where the highest volume went. You have to replace that wall first. That's essentially new wall to stop the intrusions into the United States by the cartels.
And there's the areas where no wall is existing, there's not people crossing. So of course, there's not going to be a new wall going up where no wall or no fence ever existed. I mean, there is. And, the one area we built and we brought attention to it in Sutherland Park, the government now wants to connect the wall from our wall and build all the way across that mountain and close that gap finally. And so that just got put out on bid, and we're the ones who brought attention to that. So I think it's a victory, even though we wanted to build it. The Trump administration put it out on contract, and someone's now closing that gap for good now. And that's the video where we saw hundreds of people just crossing, walking around the wall. And that's the wall that President Obama built. Obviously, he didn't build it right, and Trump's coming in to complete the job and to get it done right.
You got 1 minute
Look,
left.
here's the thing about the wall. Here's the thing about the wall in El Paso is that one of the key things is that it's helping the people in Juarez with the cartels as it's helping working class Hispanics and African Americans on the American side of the wall. So, Brian, thank you very much. Look forward to being part of the special tomorrow on We Build the Wall, 1-year anniversary, and an update on really where this wall is being built, how it's being built. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Okay, it's a special tomorrow in the afternoon. Guys, I want to go back to the question.
You got Steve, we're out. We have 10 seconds left on the show. We're going to have to pick up that thought tomorrow here on War Room Pandemic. I want all of you out there to go and follow all the social media channels, subscribe on YouTube. And if you don't, we won't be back tomorrow. But we will. See you then.